To bring our assets into Premiere Pro now. Remember, this is our source window here, so we can view any source clips that we have. And if it were video, we could select in and out points of that video, whether we wanted to bring the audio and video both together into our timeline down in the bottom right, or image only, or audio only. This is our preview window, which allows us to see what's cut together here down in the timeline as a progressive video. Of course, this is our project window down here, and there are a number of different tabs in here. You don't need them all. I'm just going to close some that I don't use. And I'm going to keep the effects. And yeah, I could keep libraries in there. I'm going to close Media Browser. So we have the project panel, and we can see it says import media here. Now, we may be importing a lot of different sources that are different sizes and resolutions. So in order to give the scene a unified sizing and resolution, what we can do is right-click right here, or control-click, and new item, and choose sequence. Or we could go up here to File, and new, and choose sequence up here. Doesn't matter how you do it, but we'll just control click, and we're going to go to new item, sequence, and we're going to call this sequence under sequence name. We're just going to call it green, because that's our sequence. It's all going to involve green. And we're going to look under here, under AVC HD. We've got 1080. There we go. Oh, that's 50 and 60 frames a second. Sorry, we'll look under here. That's 1080p. We're going to use AVC HD 1080p 24. So that's 24 frames a second at 1080p resolution. And we'll select that. We click OK. Notice the scene is black because there's nothing in it right now. And now we need to import the work. Simple, double click right here, or you could do File, Import. You could do that as well. I find this is easy. Also Control, Import is another way of doing it. But I just double click and search for our folder on the desktop. There it is. We've got all the still images that we need in there. I'm just going to click on the first one, hold down the Shift key, click on the last one, and import all of those images. And all of them are given a default of 1 second duration. And you can see, look at the difference in size as I scroll over. Each image is very different in size, and so at least by making the scene universal in terms of size, we can manage that and make sure everything's outputting at the same size. So you can see the timeline's now active. We can start dragging things in there. We have channels in there for video, V1, 2, and 3, and for audio, A1, 2, and 3, and so on. So what it is we're trying to accomplish here is editing to a theme of color, but we want to play with the intensity of the color. So go through a progression from really intense, high coverage levels of that color, in this case green, all the way down to very low intensity levels of that color. And that can mean going from highly saturated greens to highly desaturated greens with the color washed out of them, or from images that have almost 100% coverage of the color green, all the way down to images that have 10% to 5% coverage of green. So we're going for a change in intensity. However, alongside that, we're also going for a change in pacing. Pacing is very important in film editing because it allows us to create tension. It is really I would make it the equivalent of the heartbeat of the film. And so when there are very intense scenes where everything's on the line, the imagery is often cut together very quickly, and it gives an increase in that tempo, rhythm, or pacing. And we're going to try and do that. We're going to start out with a fairly calm pace, and then we're going to rapidly increase that pace as we desaturate the images, and, well, not desaturate in terms of color, but as we go to lower intensity coverage images, and then eventually we're going to slow it back down again as we ramp back up to full intensity images, and then we're going to end on a title slide. So let's begin. First thing we should do is choose which image we're going to start with. This one's got a lot of coverage, very interesting look to it. And typically, if we just click on it, we'll double click it, it shows up in our preview window, showing how it's going to look. Now, if we, so this is the asset preview or the source window. To get it into the program viewer, we need to drag that asset onto our timeline. And so here we are. And these little scrubbers here allow us to increase the elevation or zoom into an area of time. And if we do it enough, we can see a preview of the image. This represents 1 second or 24 individual frames of that image. Now you'll notice that it's being cropped. And the reason for that, of course, is the image that I unloaded here was square. So we have to think about cropping. Now if I click this in the timeline, notice that the clip is now active. And once it's active, I can go into Effects Controls and I can change things like scale right here. And you'll notice I can scale that image down. Now if I did this, we get what's called letterboxing. You're seeing areas on the left and the right hand side because of the mismatch of what we call the aspect ratio. That's the ratio of height to width. And for HDTV at 1080, the ratio is 16 units wide by 9 units tall. So it makes more sense for us to scale that up, and it did it automatically for us, to a point where we don't have any letterboxing. Of course, we can also alter positioning as well. You can see from these controls right here. So you have a lot of control once you've brought something in. So now I want to think about the next image that I have in here. And let me go with this. Again, it's another high intensity image. Drag it into the timeline. Now I need to move the scrubber head, so that's our play head, over to where the next image is. And again, we've got that issue with respect to letterboxing. Notice on the clip it's showing the letterboxing, yet in this case it's scaling it up to remove that letterboxing. Again, if we wanted to change it, we could select it and we could scale it. In fact, I could scale it to here, and then I could rotate it if I wished. Use the rotate function so that it almost matches that. I'm just going to put in -90 so you can type the values in, and then I could scale it up. That way we get more of the image included in our work. So I'm okay with that. We're still at 100%, so we go through our images. Here's another one. I'll drag it into my timeline. And again, we want these things to butt right up to one another. And we move the scrubber head over, and you'll notice that it's already scaling it up for us. And now we want to start reducing the amount. Well, I guess we can still throw a few other full intensity images in there at 1 second apiece. There we have it. perhaps even this. Go from a natural to the man-made world. I move the scrubber head over. Maybe alter the scale a little bit. Now you've got to be careful because look, I'm changing scale here. You can see me changing scale, but it's not doing anything to the image. And the reason for that, I'm just going to do Command or Control Z to undo the change. I didn't have this active. It would be making those scale changes to whatever I had active. So I've got to be careful. I'm just going to go back and review each frame just to make sure I haven't accidentally scaled the wrong thing. So with this now currently active, I want to scale that up. Or scale it down, rather. We'll go with that. And then we'll continue ramping this down in terms of intensity. So here's the next level. We'll throw this in, move the playhead over, scale that down. Again, see how I have the shoes. I've got to make sure that I have this segment selected so that I am in fact scaling the right clip. I'm just going to scale that back to about there. Likewise, do the same thing here. Throw that in. Highlight that. Scale it back too. I've got to say, it's primarily a nature theme, and it's not surprising. I kind of like that. That's dropped it right down. And then, let's say, I want to throw this one in. So I'm going to throw that one in here. So I need to move these other ones out of the way. And I can just grab them like this, and then just move them along. Like so. Drop that into position, and we're good to go. So again, I want to just check the scrubber head. For some reason, this one's not showing. There we go. Much better. Again, I want to activate it and scale it. Seems to be taking its sweet time here. It's having some issues with the rendering of that scale. There we go. It's very, very slow. Good idea, because this is a memory intensive program. Quit any other heavy lifting programs you might have running. Fortunately, I've got a few of them running in the background, and this is slowing things down a bit for me. So I like that. That's a nice little progression there. And moving along. Now remember, I can use this zoom tool to sort of stretch or collapse time. So we can move through more time in a shorter distance. And we're down to this image. Here's another one. Can throw that in. Work on the scaling. Make sure you select the clip. Scale the clip down. There's another one there. We'll drag that in. Move the playhead. Select that. Scale it down too. And you may have to make some adjustments. You know, you may find that that progression's not quite working, and that's fine. You can just change it up, move things around so that it makes more sense. I've got those arranged, and I think this is going to be me coming back out of that progression. So now we have a feather. Then we've moved into these goods. I want to scale that down. And you can see that a lot of these images that are vertical in their orientation have issues with respect to cropping. You got to lose something in order to make it conform to this wide format image scenario. So ideally, you should always be shooting wide or horizontal, or what we call portrait format, not portrait, rather landscape format shots instead of portrait format shots. And that way it dovetails much better to a video scenario because of that widescreen format. At any rate, it was worth doing that just so we get to see that happening. And this is going to be my final one in the progression, and then I'm going to work my way back out of that. And so this final one is just a light bulb at the end. That little red bar is just indicating that the rendering engine's still working on doing a full render of that. You select that and we'll scale it down a bit. And there we have it. So far, we can do a preview of that. We'll just come all the way back. Remember, each one of these things is set to a second right now. And we can see this playing. And we're not using any cross dissolves. These are called jump cuts. So literally like splicing two pieces of film together, all 1 second long. There's no kind of cross dissolving or fades or wipes going on here. It's just cuts. Really, the running shoes don't fit this theme, so I'm going to get rid of them. One neat little thing, if you select this, you can hold the Option key down, the Alt key on a PC, and delete. And it does what's called a ripple delete. It removes that object, and everything to the right of that object automatically reshifts over to fill the vacuum of space that was left over. Okay, we've got our clips in now, and it's time to fiddle around with duration. We'll do that in the next segment where we're editing the duration of these clips.